This is a guest essay written by Stephen Schechter.
The United States spent more than $320 million to build a pier to bring humanitarian aid to Gaza that the Palestinians do not want and that the Americans cannot get to work. Before the pier recently broke and started to sink in the Mediterranean Sea, Palestinians had already stolen 70% of the food that was sent in and complained that they did not need it, given that the U.S. had not supported their war of resistance. A recent report from Israel indicated that there was no starvation in Gaza. Quite the contrary, daily caloric intake had risen to above pre-October 7th levels, no thanks to the United Nations or Egypt, which also shares a border with Gaza. Only Israel delivered humanitarian aid, putting to bed the lie about wild anti-Semitic claims of international bodies accusing the Israelis of so-called war crimes. Of course, little mention was made in the world's media that $500 million worth of food had been stolen by Hamas since October 7th, nor that Hamas had robbed millions of Israeli shekels from the Palestine Bank in Gaza to bankroll its so-called Al-Aqsa flood war against Israel. Yes, you heard that correctly, shekels, because both Palestinian populations in Gaza and the West Bank use the Israeli shekel, since they lack the competence to build their own economies, and no other country in the world would dare let the Palestinians use their currency for justified fear of significant devaluation effects. Again, yet another nod to Israel's humanitarianism. As for Egypt, its repeated denials that war material had entered Gaza through tunnels from its side of the border were shown to be lies as Israel Defense Forces made their way into Rafah and discovered miles of tunnels leading all the way to the Egyptian side. Little wonder Egypt did not allow aid to get into Gaza, but insisted it be redirected through crossings controlled by Israel. But then Egypt has the thorny problem of fomenting a vitriolic Jew hatred culture despite having signed a peace treaty with Israel, which it prefers to respect in its most salient part because it does not want a war with Israel. The Egyptian government's problem is it cannot tell its own population that this is a good thing. No difference with Jordan, which goes a long way to explain why any crackpot scheme for the quote-unquote day after in Gaza, which involves some Muslim Arab governments, is doomed to fall apart, just as did the pier designed to bring aid to Palestinians who do not want it. Believe it or not, this is good news. Even Israelis who want nothing to do with Gaza will sooner or later recognize that if they want to keep their country secure, they will have no choice but to remain in Gaza until Palestinians manage to leave or miraculously decide on peaceful coexistence, if not conversion. Ha ha. In the meantime, the delirium of international actors who insist on recognizing a non-existent Palestinian state and pile up false accusations against Israel about having committed non-existent war crimes grows by leaps and bounds, putting the fictitious rules-based international order to shame and shambles. A recent report by the Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs, titled Israel Under Fire, Anatomy of a UN Crime Against Humanity, about the depraved behavior of the United Nations and its many organs since October 7th, makes for instructive, if not gruesome, reading. It also explains why Israel can do nothing but ignore all these kangaroo courts and threats. The virtue signalers of the Western world will never put their armies where their mouths are, nor will they have to. Their Muslim clients will soon be picking over their remains from National Palestinian Radio. Oops, excuse my Freudian slip, I meant National Public Radio, to the New York Times and all the British broadcasting bureaus in between. A case in point, the recent explosion in Rafah killing a certain number of civilians was due not to an Israeli missile strike as initially reported, but to the ignition of a nearby storage of stolen gas Hamas had embedded in a populated area. The Palestinian population had decided to stay rather than leave as Israel had warned them to do, loyalty to Hamas above all. But of course, the world's media never corrected their indecently hasty initial report ascribing the blast to Israeli aggression. Never in human history has one witnessed a civilization dig its own grave so quickly and enthusiastically. Even the Roman Empire took at least 200 years to decline and fall. Israel, however, shall not fall, because it cannot afford to do so. Israel has an obligation to survive, and will do whatever it takes, however much Israelis may be reluctant to do certain things. As the late Jewish philosopher Emil Fackenheim wrote, "After Hitler, Jews have another commandment to add to the 613 that govern their lives. We must survive," he said, "because we are now commanded not to give Hitler a posthumous victory." Even much of the Western world, the so-called democratic world, is ready to see Israel fall. But Israel will not fall, and if it does, it will take a lot of people down with it. So, to all friends of Israel, have faith and be of good cheer, however distressing the hour. The IDF is well on its way to victory in Gaza, and soon will turn its energies to northern Israel to deal with another genocidal terrorist organization and Iranian proxy, Hezbollah in Lebanon, where there too, the IDF shall prevail over bankrupt friend and foe alike. As for Judea and Samaria, also known as the West Bank, the murderous and mendacious Palestinian authorities' days are numbered. The God of Israel does not sleep, and neither shall we.